have agreed on how we work towards establishing a framework that you see realize the consideration of the proposal and the counter proposals that will come from the opposition. And I've had a brief engagement with the leader of minority in the National Assembly, and he has indicated that they're also in consultations with their party leadership. They are still caucusing, and as soon as they are done, we should then embark on the formal engagement now to begin work. It will be up to the committee to decide how do we address issue number one, how do we address issue number two. But I think the most important thing is what I did hear the President say, that we must all act in line with the Constitution and the laws that are there.
All right, that is the leader of majority of the National Assembly, Kimani Ichung'wah, and in this morning I have the minority leader, that is Opiyo Wandayi. Good morning, Mheshimiwa.
Morning.
It has been such a long time that we haven't had you on the show. How have you been?
As you can see, we have been very busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been extremely busy fighting for Kenyans.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm
all right.
Yeah.
Good to see you this morning. Silvana Sosoro is the majority whip of the National Assembly. Good morning.
Good morning, Sam.
Right, and let's get right into it, because you also see the reporting this morning. The Standard hope after demo deal, after incessant pressure both locally and internationally. President Ruto and Azimio leader Raila Odinga climbed down from their positions and agreed to dialogue, a move that has been received with jubilation across the country, with traders, church leaders and politicians hoping for long-lasting solutions. On the Daily Nation, search for Ruto-Raila deal starts. President Ruto on Sunday extended an olive branch to Azimio leader Raila Odinga, who called off the protest. And of course, now it's about looking for the roadmap. A day after Azimio chief Raila Odinga called off anti-government protests in response to President Ruto's offer for consensus in the recruitment of poll commissioners, the two sides hit the ground running as they met separately to pick representatives to the team that will formulate terms of engagement. Honorable Opiyo, your counterpart at the National Assembly says that you are still consulting. Do you now have a path to finding a solution, at least from your side?
We are still very far from it. What I can say is that, and this Kenyans should listen to carefully and keenly, what happened on Sunday in terms of the settlements that were made by both the Kenya Kwanza and Azimio coalition leadership was essentially a declaration of cessation of hostilities. And that would therefore give room for more constructive engagement. Okay? As we speak, no constructive engagement has commenced. We are hoping that we shall be developing a framework for these talks to start. And in my view, since the Kenya Kwanza side, through their leader, made proposals,
right,
and the Azimio also made counter-proposals. It will be important that these proposals and counter-proposals form the basis of talks before the main talks. And these talks would have to happen outside Parliament.
What does that mean, talks before talks?
Talks before talks mean that we would have to agree on preliminary issues, including, first and foremost, the structure that these deliberations within the committee is going to take. And the composition of the committee, the mechanisms of implementing its recommendations, all that need to be agreed upon beforehand in a structured manner. And therefore, as we laud this move, I must admit that there's still a lot of work ahead of us that calls for serious commitment and utmost good faith from both sides.
Let me understand this, because the President spoke of a bipartisan approach in Parliament. So when you're saying the preliminary issues need to be resolved in a structured manner, who are you talking about to do that?
You know, when you talk about a bipartisan approach within Parliament.
Right.
That is fine. And it's indeed what we have been asking for all this time. But then, given the environment within which we are operating currently, it's only logical that even before that bipartisan engagement begins in Parliament, we have to agree as parties to this conflict. We have to agree, first and foremost, on the terms of reference of that bipartisan committee. Okay? And then address its composition, address its time frame, and the mechanisms of implementing its recommendations. That's what I'm referring to as talks before the main talks.
So who is to agree on that? Is it yourself and Kimani Ichung'wah, or is it the president and Raila Odinga?
That has to be agreed upon by the leadership of the two coalitions outside Parliament.
Has there been any conversations between the president and Raila Odinga himself?
I am not privy to that.
So you don't know whether the statements on Sunday were a product of a meeting between the two?
Well, Sam, don't push me into getting into details which I want to avoid. Yes, I must of course admit that I was clear in the picture of what was happening prior to those two statements. But I want to end it at that.
The reason I'm asking is if now you want a meeting between the president and Raila Odinga to talk before the talks, does that mean they haven't spoken yet?
I am not talking about a meeting between Raila Odinga and Honorable Ruto. I'm talking about structured engagement between the two coalitions.
Through their leadership, isn't it?
Well, leadership doesn't mean doesn't mean Raila or Ruto. It could mean other cadres within the leadership structures of those two coalitions. Yeah. It doesn't really matter who it is that eventually meets who. But what we want is that we get this thing right from the outset.
Okay. All right. Honorable Osoro, so what is the strategy for you? I saw a meeting between yourselves from Parliament and President William Ruto. So what is the path to engagement for you?
President Ruto doubles up as President of the Republic of Kenya and the Kenya Kwanza Coalition leader. And under him falls other cadres of leadership. And when you heard, if you really keenly followed his speech on Sunday, he committed and made a proposal to have a bipartisan approach towards, handling this crisis, or rather the issues that were raised by Right Honorable Raila Odinga. Number one, the president has a higher responsibility of putting this country together. And when he speaks, of course, we've got to listen. What he said is actually what everybody has been saying before, that Parliament has a higher responsibility also of, representing the challenges that face this country. And what the president did, he gave, of course, he directed Parliament to take its role, to take its place, and do what ought to have been done, or what should be done, other than, because by way of representation, other than having things sorted out in the streets. And we must appreciate that Honorable Raila Odinga heeded to the call and also agreed that this is the route that we should take. So the president met us, of course, and in furthering consultations with the House leadership on what best way we should follow in coming up with a bipartisan approach, in listening to the things. You really can't ignore the leaders of this country. Right. You can't ignore Raila Odinga. You can't ignore even, a Shushaina back in the village. You need to listen to every person. And as I say, the president has that responsibility to listen to everybody. So the route that the two leaders took is very important. And that formed the reason for our meeting.
So how do you move forward? He's calling for talks before the talks. Yourselves, what do you want?
He's calling for the talks before the talks, and the talks before the talks are ongoing. You've just played a clip here where Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah said he had an engagement with an offside engagement with him the minority leader, Honorable Pio, and they agreed on how to move forward. Those are the talks before the talks. There is no other talk before the talk.
No,
By the way, I can confirm to you,
yeah.
I was also privy to the events on Sunday. There has not been any physical meeting or even a call meeting between Honorable Raila Odinga and Honorable Dr. William Ruto.
They haven't spoken. They haven't spoken.
It was merely out of a higher responsibility, a higher calling by the president to, to take charge and make a request to Right Honorable Raila Odinga to reroute, to direct, the energies towards the bipartisan approach, and which he admitted, and we really appreciate him for that. And I think that is it. We should also not really appear like we are having, and I think this minority should know, and as a mere coalition should know that we should not also look like we are, they're chasing some win somewhere, like they are making demands before demands. What will be the role? You see, the formation of a committee is not new in this country, or a bipartisan committee, what we'll call an ad hoc committee in the National Assembly, which is usually even. In any case, it's actually even. And the recommendation, each member of that committee always has one vote, that is countable. So there is nothing really that is out of space. It's something that has happened before. In 2016, when CORD then had an issue with the IBC, that time, because of the conduct and such like that, there was a formation by either coalition of the ad hoc committee, and they made recommendations then. That thing has been happening over time, so it's not really something new.
Okay.
And we've started consultations at the House leadership from the majority to come up with the select committee membership. And of course, I'm sure Honorable Opio is also taking that route, although they are making it look like there is nothing that is really happening, but they are doing it. And the committee will meet, and then they come up with recommendations, and they listen to people, they listen to those experts that want to be listened to, and they make recommendations about the things that affect this country. So there is no talk outside the talk. The talk is within the committee, just like Right Honorable Raila Odinga, appreciated. Yes, in his rejoinder.
Okay, I'm just wondering, because you've mentioned something that the president and Raila Odinga have not spoken, whether via phone or physically. So how was that agreement reached?
You see, we all live in this country, Sam. The events of the past 3 weeks or so haven't really been, interesting in this country. Kenyans have lost their lives, businesses have been closed, the economy has been affected in some areas and such like that, out of the protests. And again, when you listen to the president,
right,
he reiterated that he has listened to Raila Odinga keenly. And as I've said, the president has a higher responsibility of putting this country together. So it is out of the normal listening of what Raila Odinga was saying in public, and with the consideration that he has a responsibility to put this country together and, to avoid these chaotic scenes that we are seeing across, he made an ultimate call to Raila Odinga to call off the protest with an offer that he is committed to a bipartisan, to another route of solving this menace. And it was really out of, the responsibility as the head of the state and as a unifying factor of the country. There has not been any meeting, and that I can confirm, because there are so many things that are being said out there. They met, there's an impending handshake that is coming forth. I do not want really to believe that Raila Odinga also wants a handshake. I don't want to believe so, because it's not coming forth anyway. So they haven't met, and if they meet, it will be out of what the bipartisan committee will have resolved.
Okay.
Either through, after meeting, after it's brought to plenary or something. There has not been any meeting, and there is no handshake.
Okay. Honorable Pio, I see you smiling. I'm sure you'd want to respond, even though you're telling me that there are issues that you don't want to get into. But for the interest of the country, if indeed there has been no meeting, then how did the two sides get to the middle ground?
Well,
and through who?
Even as I do not wish to get involved in disclosing who has met who.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am also puzzled by the fact that my colleague and perhaps his team are so obsessed with the fact that the two haven't met. That, to me, is neither here nor there. Okay? What is important is that there has been engagement. Okay? And this engagement resulted into the two statements that were made on Sunday. But the most critical thing now, Sam, is how to move forward. And I am saying this for avoidance of doubt, that we have trodden this path before. The path of ad hoc committees, the path of bipartisan engagements in Parliament, and so on and so forth. But in the past, we have tended to sweep pertinent issues under the carpet, okay? In the rush to be seen to be addressing or coming up with solutions. So this time around, we are saying that we have to address the issues exhaustively and comprehensively. Sam, you know, we have had a very painful 2 or 3 weeks in this country. And Kenyans out there have got issues that are of concern to them. And I say this from a point of knowledge, because I was able to attend nearly 15 or so public barazas that preceded the mass action across the country. I must also say that I participated in the mass protests on the 20th of March, 27th of March, and on the 30th of March. I was indeed prepared to participate in the protest of the 3rd of April, which was yesterday, and subsequent ones. Okay? And in those protests alone, a lot of Kenyans have lost their lives. I had Honorable Ruto refer to 3 deaths. That's not true. The deaths that have been occasioned directly by the police disruption of the peaceful protests are more than 10. Directly. If you add to that those that have been caused indirect, that have been occasioned indirectly, it could go to more than 20. And therefore, a lot more people have actually suffered injuries. A number of them are maimed, are in hospitals. People have lost businesses as a result of police disruption of peaceful protests. So these are issues that cannot just be swept away under the carpet.
You know, Honorable P.
And therefore, they will have to be addressed as we move into the main talks. And therefore, what I'm saying is that we have to agree on the rules of the game beforehand.
You know, Honorable,
yes.
When you've just told me that the most important thing now is to move forward, but you're also raising the questions about the demonstrations have been peaceful. It is the police that have caused the violence. And really, that's such a contentious issue, depending on who is looking at it. But I don't know how now you resolve all that, because yes, the painful 3 weeks or 3 days, if you call them, how do we get out of that, knowing that there has been wounds? There are people that have lost property in this entire process.
Yes. It means that these are some of the issues that the deliberations need to address once they commence in earnest, okay? We can't just forget about them, okay? Even as we move forward, okay? I'm reading in the papers here today that the DPP has withdrawn charges against me and some of my colleagues. and it's being taken as part of the bargain, of meeting of the bargain. Nothing can be further from the truth. You don't use the police or the DPP's office to sort out political issues or to settle political scores. And then you take people who are innocent to court on trumped-up charges. And then you appear to, then you want to drop them and then appear to be meeting some part of your bargain. That cannot be acceptable. And therefore, yes, we let us, in good faith, yes, sit down as the two coalitions, the two formations, agree on the terms of reference of that bipartisan committee of the House, which we support fully.
Okay.
Yes, and its time frame and its composition, because we have said in our counter proposal that we want it to be supported by external experts people from outside parliament.
Okay.
Yes, we need a response to that. And that's what I mean by talks before talks.
Okay.
Honorable
Ndai, before I allow Honorable Soro to get a bite on it, you just said that the country shouldn't be using the police and the justice system to settle scores. But Raila Odinga asked that in accepting the call for dialogue, we asked that all arrests and prosecutions related to our demonstrations be stopped with immediate effect. The withdrawal of cases, is it a consequence of that truce?
I have no idea. I have no idea completely. Because first and foremost, I don't even understand how the DPP ever came to approve those charges for prosecution.
Okay, Honorable Soro,
yes.
What is going on here? Because we hear Raila Odinga making that statement. Yesterday we see some movement of cases being withdrawn and others to be withdrawn. Is it part of...
Not really. The statement is just coincidental. And the withdrawal just happened like any other withdrawal.
Why?
Because it's within the law that the DPP can withdraw any matter at whatever stage before conclusion. And, I mean, really, if he feels like I don't really need to proceed, you've seen these things happening in the past 6 months, cases being withdrawn that were filed, you know, some up to about 2 years ago or something. So it's not really about the deal. The DPP...
So there's no relationship between the truth on Sunday and the withdrawal of cases by DPP?
There isn't. The president made a commitment that he will respect the independence of institutions. And he respects the independence of institutions. You remember even when Dr. Fred Matiang'i had an issue, and you know, the Azimio coalition that time said, you know, the president is using the criminal justice system to intimidate Dr. Fred Matiang'i and such like that. But you saw that the DPP declined to approve charges against Dr. Fred Matiang'i because they didn't meet the threshold then. So there is nothing that is linked with the Raila statement to the withdrawal of these cases. In fact, it ought to have happened. I don't know why it took so long. It wasn't really necessary to have them, you know, to have the DPP approve those charges. I don't know how he did, because he needs also to know that he's independent. You've got to make your independent decisions before you take the matters to court. And the president is on record saying that. Even on the issues of the police, you've heard the president saying that we have given you a vote. You know, make your own independent decisions. So any person linking political, you know, issues to the police machinery or independent bodies should cease.
Okay.
And I think that must be clear. The president or our coalition does not have any interest of using the criminal justice system to settle political scores.
Then I must say that's an interesting coincidence that after that statement on Sunday, then the withdrawal follows the following day. I want us to take a short break here on the break. When we come back, we continue looking at the situations and the conversations that have gone on and what really it must take to have a lasting solution out of the stalemate after the break.